Good day, everyone. We are Group 7. Today, we will be presenting the biogeochemical cycle of calcium. As we proceed to the topic, we will see the cyclic pattern of how calcium is recycled in the environment, which will be made available for the assimilation of living organisms again. Along with this are the direct and indirect effects of disrupted cycle of calcium, brought by climate change due to the unregulated anthropological activities. The calcium cycle typically starts from the inputs to various ecosystems, which are generally derived from the chemical weathering of calcium-containing minerals, the typical components of rocks. Calcium ions are released into solution through the weathering of silicate, carbonate, phosphate, and sulfate minerals in rocks, sediments, and soils. Weathering of calcium-containing rocks may occur in continents and oceans. For calcium-bearing silicates, the most significant weathering processes are as follows. 3 molecules of water plus 2 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 1 molecule of calcium silicate forms calcium plus 2 molecules of bicarbonate plus 1 molecule of silicon hydroxide. While for carbonates, 1 molecule of calcium carbonate plus 1 molecule of water plus 1 molecule of carbon dioxide yields calcium and 2 molecules of bicarbonate. Additionally, plant activities contribute to the cycle specifically through boosting mineral weathering rates, and research has indicated that in soils, plants and symbiotic relationships with mycorrhizal fungus may directly access mineral-bound calcium before it reaches the soil solution. As what was mentioned, calcium is a major component of biominerals such as calcium carbonate. In marine ecosystems, calcium is stored in biological materials and may be recycled through the degradation of organic waste and calcium-containing biominerals. Dead marine organisms that have calcium-containing biominerals sink down on the ocean floor as sediments. In bodies of water, weathering occurs and calcium is released into the ocean as the calcium from shells and rocks from the ocean floor. Moreover, hydrothermal vents also contribute calcium to the seas. With this, it can be inferred that calcium ions are abundant in marine ecosystems. Sediment-rich water from the ocean floor then travels onto the surface water by upwelling. Water from the ocean then evaporates and enters the atmosphere. Calcium will come back to land or ocean by precipitation. Precipitation that carries calcium ions that makes its way to land may either enter the soil and can run off through riverine or groundwater into the ocean again, or calcium may be taken up plants and re-enter soil by fallen or dead material or animal wastes. Because calcium is a positively charged ion, it may be adsorbed to the surface of negatively charged clay and organic particles in the soil. Positively charged ions or cations adsorb to soil particles, and they may be interchanged with other ions in the soil solution. Calcium enters an organic phase when it is taken by plants or microbes. Calcium in this form is constantly exchanged between plant roots, microbes, and soil. When a plant animal or soil fauna dies, the composers break it down and calcium is returned to the soil in a soluble form. Calcium alternates between the soluble and insoluble phases on a regular basis. In terrestrial ecosystems, calcium pools include reservoirs in soils and soil minerals, organisms, and decaying organic waste. Precipitation ultimately makes its way back into the ocean even if it falls on land, providing bodies of water with calcium again. These ions will enter the marine ecosystem, turn into the sediments once again, and restart the cycle.
And now, we will be talking about the disturbed cycle of calcium and its effects. First off, biodiversity. In terrestrial ecosystems, the increasing atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide increases the weathering rate of minerals, which in turn causes enhanced leaching. Leaching of calcium minerals affect plants as it is found to be its limiting factor for growth. In aquatic ecosystems, the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is absorbed by the ocean. As a consequence, it lowers the concentration of carbonate ions and thereby making the medium acidic. Eventually, the decrease in pH will cause the decrease in calcium biominerals. Having lower calcium concentration than the normal, it critically affects coral reefs as it decreases calcification rates. Altogether, plants being the lowest in the trophic level, it affects the nutrient needed of its succeeding consumers once growth is disturbed. Corals, on the other hand, once it shrinks due to calcification rates, which are lower, it reduces the structural integrity of the ecosystem, which decreases the food and shelter available for hundreds of thousands of species. Next is about food security. Calcium plays a critical role as a crop nutrient and as a soil amendment. The element coming from it were used by plants as cell integrity, the strength of the cell wall. The structural quality of calcium is needed in right forms for plants, then to animals, and so on as to where the calcium was being transferred to. That is, to the next stages of the food web. However, due to human interference and climate change, the biogeochemical cycle, especially the biorhythm of calcium, was altered. One unavoidable impact of it was a disruption of food security. The increase in temperature, changes in the precipitation pattern, and other natural activities associated with crops and vegetation causes them to lose nutrients that's needed for animals and humans. Furthermore, yields and crop sustainability are declining due to the projected higher temperature. Heat stress reduces fruit set and speeds up development of annual vegetables, resulting in yield losses, impaired product quality, and increasing food loss and waste. Thus, the decline in food nutrients was not the only influence of climate change. The production of agricultural products was affected as well. Also, worldwide food security could be harmed by changes in ocean chemistry driven by fossil fuel use that results to ocean acidification. Ocean acidification happens as seawater absorbs up to a third of the carbon emissions. We, humans, release, setting off a chemical chain of reaction that robs marine animals of calcium carbonate, an essential building block for shells and skeletons. The reduced availability of foods like clams and oysters could worsen protein shortages for human population globally.
Human health. Calcium is one of the essential minerals in the human body, for it is associated with the building of healthy and strong bones and teeth. This element also plays an integral part in blood clotting, muscle contraction, regulation of heartbeat, and nerve functions. Calcium is consumed by the body through two ways. One is through eating foods and supplements that contain calcium, while the other is drawing calcium from the body. Disturbance in the calcium cycle affects the calcium content taken in by plants. This then also affects the calcium bioavailability, or the amount of calcium that is absorbed and used by the body. Some plant foods consist of antinutrients, which bind to calcium and decrease its bioavailability. Deficiency of calcium, also called hypocalcemia, badly affects human health. It results in slower hair growth, easy fracturing of bones, muscle cramps, numbness, and tingling in the hands, feet, and face, and can also cause seizures. Water quality. CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere have already increased by 90 mAtm, by more than a third. Moreover, it is added to the atmosphere and will eventually be absorbed by the ocean, which acidifies it. The pH of surface waters has already dropped by 0.1 units, a significant amount, and within 40 years, carbonate ion concentrations below aragonite saturation will begin to occur in polar waters, spreading eventually into lower latitudes. If CO2 emissions continue unabated, the pH of the ocean will eventually sink to level lower than it has been for hundreds of millions of years. The response of coccolithophore species to increased acidification will tend to induce an acidification-driven shift in the phytoplankton toward non-calcareous forms, which would have an impact on the cycling of CO2, nutrients, and alkalinity in the ocean through alteration of the biological pumping of particulate organic matter and biominerals into the deep sea. If the ratio of particulate organic carbon to calcium carbonate sinking into the deep sea increases due to the lesser production of calcium biominerals by foraminifera and coccolithophores, this will result in biological pump being more effective at sequestering CO2 in the deep sea, which will lower the atmospheric concentrations at the expense of more quickly lowering the pH of the deep sea. To sum up, calcium being identified as the limiting factor for plant growth, prolonged perturbation in its cycle would cause major disruption of nutrient distribution in the food chain, as it is the lowest in the trophic level. Another, as an important component of biominerals, perturbation in its cycle would equate to loss of food and shelter available for hundreds of thousands of species. Hence, this only means that the altered cycle of calcium significantly affects the necessities of the human global population. We students, knowing the importance of the minerals involved in this activity, should promote sustainable efforts to maintain its natural cycle. The global population should realize that we should aim for our ecosystem's maximum protection and not for its maximum production.